Roger Federer just handed Alex Eala a luxury watch, and within seconds the internet was already unraveling. What began as a quiet, almost invisible moment backstage at the ATP Finals somehow exploded into one of the most talked about scenes in modern tennis. But this was never really about the watch. It was about respect, about recognition, about a signal sent so loudly it rattled the entire sports world. Because when legends choose to acknowledge those still climbing, the ground shifts beneath everyone watching. And what followed? No one could have predicted it. November 2024, Turin, Italy. The ATP Finals were roaring, the arena packed with the world's best male players fighting for the crown, every rally heavy with history. Yet away from the spotlight, inside sponsor lounges and winding media corridors, something else was quietly unfolding. Something unexpected. Alex Eala wasn't even supposed to be there. She had just survived a punishing WTA 125 tournament in Spain, pushing through injuries, fatigue, and sheer willpower just to protect her ranking. Her season had been relentless. She battled through qualifiers, suffered early exits at majors, and carried a kind of pressure that ends careers before they begin. At just 22, she was still chasing her breakthrough, still knocking on doors that refused to open, still trying to convince the tennis world and herself that she truly belonged among the elite. But her management team had quietly secured her an invite to an exclusive Nike event running alongside the ATP Finals, the kind of room where careers quietly change, networking, sponsors, handshakes, and maybe, if luck allowed, a glimpse of the legends she'd grown up worshipping from afar. She almost skipped it. Her body was exhausted, her mind heavier than her racket bag. Still, something inside her whispered to go. The event unfolded inside a private suite overlooking the main court, where players, coaches, and executives drifted beneath soft lights and the low clink of champagne glasses. Eala stayed close to the edges, half visible, uneasy beneath the attention. These spaces weren't built for her. Women's tennis rarely shared oxygen with the men's circuit. The pay gap, the media focus, the respect, it was tilted, always had been. She felt it. Everyone did. And then, across the room she saw him. Roger Federer. Retired for 2 years, yet still the gravitational center of any room he entered. He stood with sponsors, laughing easily, completely at home. A guest of honor. A living myth. Eala had watched him lift Wimbledon trophies as a child, memorized his footwork, his calm, his elegance under fire. And now he was there, barely 10 meters away. She didn't move. She wouldn't dare. But fate rarely waits for permission. Federer's gaze drifted across the room, and for one suspended second, his eyes found hers. He stopped mid-conversation. Then, without hesitation, he excused himself and walked straight toward her. Eala froze where she stood. Federer reached out his hand, wore that unmistakable warm smile, and said words she would carry forever. "I've been following your journey. You fight like a champion." She barely found her voice. Her thoughts collided all at once. Roger Federer knew who she was. He had watched her matches. It felt unreal, but it was happening. And what came next would quietly reshape everything. This wasn't a passing compliment or polite encouragement. Federer had something else in mind, something powerful enough to send shockwaves through the tennis world. Their conversation lasted only minutes, yet time seemed to stretch endlessly. He asked about her season, her ambitions, her mental battles. He listened with real curiosity, the kind that strips away titles and rankings, seeing her not as a prospect or a stat, but as a fighter, as a human being. Then he slipped a hand into his jacket pocket. People nearby would later replay the moment frame by frame. Some thought he was checking his phone. Others assumed it was a business card. But when his hand emerged, it held a small, refined box, deep blue, instantly recognizable. A Rolex box. Eala's eyes widened. Federer opened it slowly, revealing a Rolex Daytona, rose gold, white dial, an icon of precision and legacy. The kind of watch that costs more than most lower-tier players earn in an entire year, resting now in his palm, offered without spectacle, heavy with meaning. "I want you to have this," Federer said softly. "Not for what you've achieved yet, but for how fiercely you fight for it." The room fell into a stunned silence. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Phones quietly appeared, recording without sound. Aya stood frozen, hands shaking as she took the box. She tried to refuse, insisted it was too much, too undeserved. Federer gently shook his head. "You remind me of myself at your age," he told her. "Hungry, relentless, and always wondering if the world will ever notice. Wear this and remember you belong here." Her eyes burned with tears. She whispered a thank you, knowing it could never be enough. Federer smiled, rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder, and walked away as casually as he'd arrived. She opened the box again. The watch caught the soft glow of the sweet lights, radiant and unreal. Then she noticed something else. An engraving on the back. She tilted it closer, heart racing. "To those who fight beyond the baseline. RF." Her breath hitched. This wasn't random. This wasn't flashy generosity. It was deliberate. Personal. One fighter recognizing another. And still she had no idea what storm was about to follow. Within 30 minutes, photos leaked online. A shaky clip showed Federer handing her the box. Another captured her tearful reaction. Twitter ignited. Instagram flooded. Reddit dissected every frame. TikTok amplified it all. The internet detonated. What began as a beautiful moment of recognition quickly twisted into controversy, because not everyone saw inspiration. Some saw favoritism. And the backlash came fast and merciless. The first wave of reaction felt like pure awe. Fans flooded timelines calling it a class act, a legend lifting the next generation with a single, unforgettable gesture. Federer's name shot to the top of worldwide trends within hours. Aya's follower count exploded overnight. Clips of the moment pulled in millions of views, replayed again and again like something people wanted to believe in. But then the mood shifted. Quietly at first. Tennis forums began buzzing with questions that wouldn't go away. Why Alex Eala? Why not Coco Gauff, fresh off a US Open win? Why not Iga Swiatek, the dominant force in women's tennis? Why not Emma Raducanu, whose Cinderella run had captured the world? Admiration turned into suspicion. Some accused Federer of favoritism. Others claimed it was a calculated Nike publicity stunt, noting both athletes shared the same sponsor. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Maybe Aya's team had paid for it. Maybe the entire moment was staged for social media engagement. The criticism grew sharper, louder. One viral tweet read, "Federer gifts a Rolex to a player outside the top 100 while real champions get ignored. Make it make sense." Another posted, "This is what's wrong with tennis. The rich get richer, stars get spotlighted, everyone else disappears." Even players weighed in, anonymously of course. Quotes surfaced in tabloids. "It's hard watching opportunities handed out while the rest of us grind in silence," one unnamed WTA player said. The backlash escaped the internet. ESPN panels debated it. Podcasts dissected every angle. Some defended Federer's right to give whatever he wanted to whomever he chose. Others argued it sent the wrong message, that tennis success depended on connections, not merit. Aya stayed silent for 48 hours. Her team urged patience. But the noise only kept growing. And then she broke her silence with a single Instagram story. No caption. No explanation. Just a photo of the watch resting on her wrist, paired with a quiet line laid over the image. "This isn't about the gift. It's about being seen." The post detonated instantly. Supporters rushed in, defending her with facts and context. They shared her stats, her setbacks, her scars. They reminded the world she'd spent years battling injuries, financial strain, and a system that offered little support. That she represented a forgotten generation of players slipping through the cracks of professional tennis. But the backlash didn't disappear. Others called it entitled, tone-deaf, a young player flaunting luxury while thousands struggled just to afford flights and hotel rooms to tournaments. The argument spiraled. Comment sections burned. And at the center of it all sat one unresolved question. What did the watch actually mean? The truth wasn't online. It wasn't in headlines or hot takes. It was buried in a conversation almost no one knew existed. A moment from months earlier that changed everything. 3 months before Turin. Wimbledon 2024. Alex Eala had clawed her way through 3 brutal rounds of qualifying just to earn a place in the main draw. She lost in the first round, but not quietly, not easily. A 3-set war against a top 30 player stretched beyond 2.5 brutal hours, every point carved out with defiance, every ounce of strength emptied onto the grass. She gave everything she had. And still it wasn't enough. Afterward, she sat alone in the locker room, elbows on her knees, head buried in her hands. The weight of it all crashed down at once. All the work. All the sacrifices. And for what? Another early exit. Another reminder she was still standing outside the gates looking in. That's when Federer passed by. He was at Wimbledon as a guest, breathing in the air of a tournament he'd conquered 8 times. He noticed her through the open doorway, the slumped shoulders, the quiet unraveling. He tapped gently on the frame. "Tough match out there," he said. Ella looked up, startled, wiping her eyes too quickly, embarrassed. "I watched the last set," Federer continued. "You didn't quit." "Not once." "That's rare." She didn't trust her voice, so she nodded. Federer stepped inside, sat across from her on the bench. "I lost in the first round of Wimbledon once," he said. 2002 defending champion. "I got destroyed. I thought my career was finished." Ella stared at him, stunned. She'd never heard that story. Then he leaned forward. "But that day taught me something. The fight isn't always about winning. It's about showing up when every part of you wants to quit. That's what separates the good from the great." They spoke for nearly 20 minutes, about pressure, about doubt, about the quiet loneliness that follows players from city to city. Federer opened up about his early years, the seasons when he questioned himself, the moments when walking away felt easier than believing. Before he left, he locked eyes with her. "Don't let this sport break you," he said softly. "You have something special. I can see it." Ella never forgot that conversation. It stayed with her through the rest of the season, through injuries, through losses, through long nights when everything felt uncertain. And months later, Federer remembered too. He remembered watching her fight, tracking her journey, and deciding she deserved recognition, not for trophies but for resilience. The engraving on the watch wasn't random. "To those who fight beyond the baseline." It was a reminder, a symbol, a quiet message to every player who felt unseen. But the world didn't know this story. Not yet. And when Ella finally chose to share it, the narrative began to shift. Still, not everyone was ready to hear it. 2 days after her Instagram post, Eala sat down for an interview on a tennis podcast. She hadn't planned to speak out, but the noise had become too loud to ignore. She needed to tell the truth. She spoke about Wimbledon, the locker room, Federer's kindness, the meaning behind the watch. "This wasn't about favoritism," she said, her voice steady, her emotion unmistakable. "It was about someone believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That was all it ever was." The clip from the interview spread instantly, millions watching as her words echoed far beyond tennis. Some fans were deeply moved. They filled her comments with support, shared their own stories of grinding in silence, of almost quitting, of needing just one person to see them, calling her brave for finally speaking out. But others only dug in harder. A former WTA player tweeted, "I respect Roger, but there are hundreds of players working just as hard. Why does one person get the spotlight?" A prominent tennis journalist published an op-ed titled "The Rolex Controversy Exposes Tennis's Privilege Problem." The conversation widened, shifting away from Ella herself and toward the sport as a whole. The financial gaps, the lack of safety nets for lower-ranked players, the way tennis often rewards connections over survival. Eala found herself standing at the center of a firestorm she never asked to ignite. Meanwhile, younger players began to react. Some defended her openly. Others stayed carefully silent. A few hinted at resentment. One rising star posted a cryptic message that quickly went viral. Hard work should speak louder than gifts. The tennis world was split. And then Federer spoke. Quietly, deliberately, he took to social media with a short, simple, yet powerful statement. I've given advice, support, and yes, gifts to many players over the years, some publicly, most privately. Alex earned this moment not because of her ranking, but because of her heart. That's all that matters to me. For some, it ended the debate. For others, it only widened the chasm. Because this was never just about a watch. It was about what tennis values, about whether the sport was ready to honor fighters, not just winners. Months have passed since that night in Turin. The controversy has faded from headlines, but its echoes remain. Alex Eala's career took a turn no one expected. 3 months later, she captured her first WTA title, a victory infused with the confidence born from Federer's faith in her. In interviews, she still wears the watch, still recalls that night as a defining moment. But the larger story goes beyond one gift or one gesture. The episode forced the tennis world to reckon with uncomfortable truths. The lower-tier circuits are punishing, most players struggle in near-total obscurity, and recognition, support, and opportunities are often reserved for those who have already arrived. It was a moment that reminded everyone watching that sometimes the hardest battles are fought long before the trophies appear, and that seeing a fighter for who they are can change everything. Federer's gesture, whether fully calculated or instinctive, became more than a gift. It turned into a symbol. A quiet reminder that belief can shift everything, that a single moment of validation can ripple through a career. Yet it also revealed the darker side of sport. Jealousy, resentment, the hard truth that not everyone is afforded those moments, that fairness is often an illusion. Eala navigated it all with poise. She used her rising platform to advocate for better support for lower-ranked players, speaking candidly about mental health, financial struggles, and the loneliness that shadows life on tour. And Federer? He continues to mentor quietly, reaching out to players who remind him of himself, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes gifts whose meaning far exceeds their monetary value. The Rolex Daytona still rests on Eala's wrist, a shimmering reminder of a Wimbledon locker room conversation, a symbol of resilience, a message engraved in gold for anyone willing to fight beyond the baseline. So, was it just a generous act from a legend to a rising star? Or was it a moment that exposed tennis's deep inequalities? Perhaps it was both, and that's exactly what gives it its power. In a sport obsessed with rankings, trophies, and headlines, Federer chose to honor something else entirely: the fight, the heart, the refusal to quit. And in that choice, he reminded us all that sometimes simply being seen matters more than any title, more than any accolade, more than anything the world can measure.